Welcome to From Age to Age, an oral history podcast series about the parish history and hopes for the future from the Church of St. Francis Xavier in New York City. The Oral History Project was conceived to preserve the unique history of this church by inviting our longtime parishioners to share their personal stories, illustrating why this parish is distinctive, unique, and a very special place.
Here I am, Lord.
Hello, I'm Ed Poliandro. I am a parishioner at St. Francis Xavier. I have been here for the last 27 years, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with a fellow journeyer on the spiritual road and parishioner, Bill Koss.
Thanks, Ed.
Maybe we can begin with your walking in the door of St. Francis Xavier. When did that happen? And what was that like? And what did you notice first as you entered into that space?
Differently from perhaps a lot of other parishioners, had two initial experiences of Xavier. In the 1980s, a former boyfriend of mine and I lived on Fifth Avenue and 15th Street, and we would come to Xavier, and this was way before the renovations. I remember it being dark, gloomy, dusty, and not a place that I really wanted to pray in. Years later, around 2009, 2010, I found myself in the East Village and started going to Most Holy Redeemer Church on 3rd Avenue. Very beautiful church, very nice Redemptorist priest. Not a thing to do there. No ministries, no activities, no groups. And that's what I was looking for. So I started looking around the area. Remember St. Francis Xavier? I said, I wonder if it still is as dark and gloomy. Well, the first thing I noticed was the renovation. It was bright. It was shiny. It was clean. It looked wonderful. The sun coming in the stained glass windows. My first experience coming back was on Ash Wednesday. So the sun was coming in. The church was full. It was just a very powerful experience and a very good welcome back to Francis Xavier.
I remember what you said about the darkness of the space, and then it all changed. And it seemed that you just fell right in with it. And then what happened?
I wouldn't say slowly, but at a very moderate pace, became very much linked to it. Father Dan Carew, one of our former pastors, put it just properly that I found my spiritual home. And that's what I did. I mean, certainly we have, upwards of 20, 25 ministries and activities and groups. I belong to 7 of them. They are a true delight to me and my spiritual life. And also, I've made friends, which I think should go hand in hand with your spiritual home, is that you make friends, both, temporal friends and spiritual friends. And that's been just a wonderful, extraordinary benefit to being at Xavier.
Well, one of the things that I was struck by is that you said when you started looking, you were not only looking for a church, but it sounded like a community and to do things. Does that mean that your faith is practiced out? It's not just taken in, but moving out and doing things. Can you say more about that?
That's a very good point. While I have very luckily a Jesuit priest as my spiritual director and a wonderful guide, there is a lot that I like to do outside of myself, outside of my prayer life. And one of those is being a coordinator, the Mass coordinator with the liturgical ministries. And I know a lot of the other liturgical ministers state that, I can't really be a coordinator because there's so much to wonder about, so much to watch out for, so much to do. I can't pray. I find for myself, that's how I pray the best, is that I know I'm helping others to experience the same Xavier liturgy that I did when I first started coming to Xavier, that everything runs smoothly. Friends of mine will ask me, well, what do you do as a Mass coordinator? I said, well, it's a combination of 3 things. Sacristan, because we do set up for Mass and take care of the sacred vessels afterwards. Traffic manager, to make sure that everyone is where they should be at the right time, and master of ceremonies to the presider. And that usually helps in understanding what we do versus a Mass coordinator.
Well, I can vouch for you as a coordinator because I have been at Mass and I've seen you in action. It is really something, now that I'm listening to you, it is really something to see when everything is going well, what that's like in terms of a worship experience. So I have to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And you are welcome. I remember Father Peter Fink said this once to us. He said, make it look like whatever you're doing is what was supposed to happen, because the congregation doesn't know what was supposed to happen.
I was struck by your statement about prayer. As your fellow coordinators some might say, I can't pray. I'm running all over the place. I'm serving the people, our faith community, but I'm not praying. But you don't seem to think that's not your experience.
That's not been my experience. Yeah. A little bit of background with me. I studied to be a Carmelite for 2 years, and they looked at themselves as being contemplatives in action. One of the things that I learned from them was to do that, my prayer life. And also the Jesuits say that all the time, of finding God in everything. Particularly Father Ricardo, I like the way he ends Mass. And Father Thomas, go out and do this in the world. In a small way, that's what I see myself doing. Being coordinator is an outgrowth of that.
Yeah, it's serving God. It's communicating with God by taking care of God's people.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about doing, because you're the guy with the ministry. There's so many ministries that you serve.
I have to write them down because I figured you would ask, and I wanted to write them down. So in addition to liturgical ministries, I'm a member of the Gay Catholics, Xavier Outings, the brunch ministry, which has been a lot of fun. That was such a smart idea on the brunch ministry, folks. Adult activities, environment ministry, and Stations of the Cross. All of those for different reasons, like say Xavier Outings and adult activities. More the temporal friendship level. Though I have to say, one of the things we did with Xavier Outings was go to Greenwood Cemetery. And what a beautiful place. And so quiet and really so peaceful and prayerful. And with adult activities, we've been to concerts, we've been to museums. So all of that really fits into, as Father Dan Carew had said, my spiritual home, and making it my spiritual home.
Yeah. I remember with Father Dan, he said that. You're reminding me of that. And he also said, welcome home.
Yes.
At each Mass, and how that, has such an impact on all of us, but especially people who may be new. Could you say, for those who may not know what Xavier Outings ministry is, can you say more about it?
Certainly. It's a group of parishioners who plan different events outside of, let's say, the confines of the parish.
Yeah.
We've been to exhibits at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We've been to Greenwood Cemetery, both during the day and in the evening. Like the brunch ministry, it's a way of mixing the different masses. And I'm sure this has come up before, and I'm sure you know this. There's almost like 4 mini parishes within Xavier. There's the Saturday 5 p.m., the Sunday 9, the Sunday 11:30, and the Sunday 5. Yeah. But like the brunch ministry, Xavier Outings mixes people together. And you get to see an entirely different side of people by doing that. Because I don't want to say that we're dressing up, but we are playing a role. We are playing a part at Mass. But when you're free to be more yourself and free to be, not in the confines of, I'm a coordinator, I'm a lector, I'm part of the Xavier the Xavier players who play on Sunday at 5. But, I'm just a Xavier parishioner or a friend, and I'm here to enjoy and be with you. That particularly, I would say the 2 things, the adult activities and the Xavier Outings, that's something that a lot of parishes just don't have and just don't do. Yeah. And that's why Xavier is such a special place, because we're able to do things like that. I mean, we have, both the traditional and more contemporary liturgies and devotionals. But we do these other things that builds community. And that, I think, is one of the key things in Xavier, is building community.
And that touches on the whole concept of spirituality that you clearly embody just by the conversation that we've had so far. But the spirituality is not just what happens in a church or at a Eucharist. It's how we live, and the idea of connection And that's what I'm hearing you say a lot about, people getting connected, people dropping roles, seeing God in each other,
Yes.
and not only in this space, but enjoying
hmm
life. I want to get back to one other ministry,
hmm
and that's the Stations of the Cross. How did that come about, and what's it been like?
Well, a little background first. I still remember very clearly. I went to parochial school, Catholic grammar school, high school, and college. We only had the little murals in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
At Xavier, we're very lucky to have those huge murals that really give you a sense of the drama of what's happening during Stations of the Cross. But I remember as a child, not so much the Rosary, but Stations of the Cross was a very key devotional for me. And then many years later, when Father Bob Varek was pastor, he did many wonderful things, but two wonderful things in particular. He had a parishioner meeting before Advent and before Lent. And he asked parishioners, what do you like about Advent? What do you
Mm-hmm.
not like about Lent? What would you like to see? I should have learned from 35 years in corporate America not to open my mouth, but I did. And I said, Father Bob, is there a reason why we only do Stations of the Cross once during Lent? Because originally we had only been doing it on Good Friday. And Father Bob said, well, Bill, if you'd like to manage that, I would love for you to do that. And there I am with Stations of the Cross.
Right.
And it is such an honor, such a delight, such a prayerful experience for me. And again, even though I have to do a lot during Stations, it still is very, very spiritual, very prayerful for me. And I think particularly for Xavier, and I think about our mission statement, which is very much focused both on the Jesuits and the priests in the parish, but on the laity, the parishioners in the parish, that the parishioners get involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm very pleased that when their schedule allows, the priests do come to Stations, but it's all parishioner run. Like this past year, we had Stations 5 times. The Catholic lesbians did one. The Environment Ministry did another. The Racial Justice did a third. The RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation Program, did a fourth. And the fifth is escaping my mind right at this moment. But you can see the variety of
Yeah.
perspectives. I guess that's the best way, because we keep Stations, the traditional 14 stations, or if you want to include the resurrection, the 15th station, but it's through this ministry's eyes, through their perspective. And I've learned so much about women saints and holy women of the past. Much more what we're doing to the environment in a very bad way, how that's affecting, sadly, the least people it should be affecting are those who are in, more serious economic and physical situations. But it brings, I think, a lot to our parish in doing this, just as all the other ministries do. I mean, you look at our choir, for one thing, a vast array of people. These are our parishioners who are singing in the choir. These are our parishioners who are organizing Stations of the Cross.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really doing it, the right thing for the right reason.
I just remembered the last ministry.
Oh,
It
okay.
was Family Faith.
Yes, family faith.
And I have to ask you about that, because that is so unique that children, I work in the Family Faith ministry, I help out there, and that how young people are taking in the death of Jesus and what they had to say. Can you say more about that? And what it was like
I
for
think
you?
it's been 2 years now, or 3 years, that Family Faith has been involved. And it is so heartwarming
Mm.
to see little kids, early teenagers, and then they move into young adults. But, that age group after 5 years old, before 18, being involved. And first thing, it reminds me of my first introduction to Stations of the Cross. And hopefully there will be others this will be a hook and a connection to them. Second of all, they need to be exposed to this. It certainly would be easy to pick up a Stations of the Cross pamphlet and do the devotional on your own. But that's one of the hallmarks of Xavier is the community. We do this together. Family Faith does this with the young adults group. They are so well rehearsed and so well practiced. Some of the words they've given them to say, they get them out. My favorite is when they, not Joseph of Arimathea, but Simon of Cyrene. They get Simon of Cyrene out. And it's like, I don't think I could have gotten those words out correctly when I was that age. Hopefully, there'll be one or two where we'll get a little hook in, and they may be doing this 50 years from now in my footsteps. That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful. And it was different when parochial schools were staffed by 20 nuns, and we all paraded out to the church and back again. But now it's a little bit more difficult because the family has to make that effort, but Xavier is meeting them halfway.
So you're describing a live community, a vibrant community,
Yes.
a human community. And in every community, there are all kinds of experiences. Can you say something about the happiest memory you have and perhaps the saddest memory you have in your experience here?
Thinking about that, actually, it's the same situation that is both the happiest and saddest in a way, yes, which was the funeral of Father Dan Berrigan. I had been involved with the Catholic worker movement and volunteered at the St. Joseph House of Hospitality for a number of years. Through them, I learned of the Kairos prayer community that Father Dan ran. And the first time I went, I was just dumbfounded that there was Father Dan Berrigan, this celebrity, this name from my past that, people, of course, have various opinions, but made a statement on anti-war and pacifism and held to that and stuck to his priestly vows and stayed a Jesuit to the very end. And there he was. And such a beautiful spiritual man, such an interested individual in each person. He eventually knew me by name, which I was just absolutely floored about. He would lead the prayer group. As time went on and he got older, I know he was in residence at 96th Street at the Jesuit residence.
That's right.
There. I think then he probably went into some sort of hospice care. And then I remember when Father Joe Marina was pastor, it was announced that his funeral would be at Xavier. And I was just so excited about that. And I went back and forth in my mind, should I volunteer to serve or should I just participate? And I decided just to participate. I wanted to remember my memories of Father Dan. What was nice, they had a viewing of his coffin in the church. So there was that time that you would normally have in a funeral home, which I guess priests don't necessarily do, but we had that time in the church, and then the church was absolutely packed. They even had people in the choir loft. And I remember the provincial at the time was very funny. He said, and to those here from the FBI and the CIA, yes, Father Dan Berrigan is actually dead. You don't have to, you can close your files on him now. You don't have to worry about this. And it was such a beautiful ceremony. All the priests who came to celebrate, all the people, his family, just an amazing group of people. And that, to me, probably exemplifies, the world lost this wonderful passive,
Yeah.
I don't know if passive is the right word, but pacifist, anti-war man who stood up for what he believed in, whether, the church as a whole believed or not. And yet one of the happiest ones because he was in heaven. He was in heaven with the rest of the Jesuits and his birth family and his religious family.
When you just shared about the statement of the provincial to the FBI, that reminded me of something very much about Xavier, that we are all encouraged to live the gospel of justice and mercy, no matter what it takes. And of course, the model that we have is Jesus
Right.
and his life and what happened to him. But that was the message here that I'm very familiar with, and I'm hearing you talk about today, that, yeah, whatever it takes, that's what our commitment is, to live this in the world.
One of the wonderful benefits that I was not expecting when I was looking for a parish outside of Most Holy Redeemer was the LGBTQ ministries, the gay Catholics, the Catholic lesbians,
Yeah.
that it's there in the forefront. Last Friday, on May 31st, we celebrated the 31st anniversary of the LGBTQ ministries.
Yes, we did.
And how special is that? How wonderful is that? And the fact that different pastors, different associate pastors are all behind us. Just, what we're able to learn from each other in the gay Catholics ministry, in the Catholic lesbian ministry. When they do Stations of the Cross, the amount I've learned about holy women that I would not have, just not been in the position to hear about otherwise. What stands out to me most this year from gay Catholics was Iago Cuestra's presentation on the Feast of the Three Kings. Sadly, so many religious holidays in the United States have been watered down by Hallmark. But to see, particularly in the Spanish and Latin and Hispanic communities do for the Three Kings Festival was just inspiring, was just inspiring. I was so delighted with that.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought this whole thing up about the LGBTQ ministries here. I certainly, for one, have felt blessed in my life to found my way in the door. For us, there's always been a question of, or has been traditionally, gay and Catholic. And then there's that spiritual life that we're all called to be with all our identities. Can you talk about what that has been like for you and how you have come home to a sense of oneness with all the identities, and what's that been like here at Xavier?
Thankfully, luckily, I never had any bad experience, as I know many gay men and women have, and I feel for them. Even friends of mine who know of my spirituality and my religiousness, how can you be Catholic? And it's like, the church is more than the physical church that we see around us. The church is my relationship with God, my relationship with Jesus. And the church should be there to help with that and foster that relationship, but not come in the way. And I never had any bad experience, any awful things said to me. And I'm very thankful for that. Growing up as a gay man on Long Island, it kind of just slowly dawned on me that initially I didn't have a word to put to it. So I didn't know what to call it, and I didn't know if other people felt this way. But then by the time I got to college, I realized other people do feel this way, and it's okay. It was just something very slowly that I learned about myself and accepted that reminds me of a 1970s slogan, God doesn't make junk. And God does not make junk. God makes all of us in God's likeness. We're
Right.
all free will, free spirit. We can make our own decisions. And one thing that the gay Catholics did, which I found so helpful, was the presentation by the wonderfully made director and producer. Unfortunately, I think the producer wasn't able to come, but the director came. And we looked at all of these images of
That's right.
gay men and women in crucifixion or near to crucifixion garb, but it was rainbow colors. And even the Sacred Heart was a rainbow color. And that struck me. I have one in my window at home.
Yeah.
And that really struck me that, this is what, and I think that's the beauty of the rainbow, is that everyone is included. It covers, from the yellows to the purples and every color in between.
How blessed, that's what I'm hearing you say, how blessed your life has been in terms of how you came into awareness of the fullness of who you are. And not everybody
No.
has that. And one of the things that Xavier has done so well is when people come to us who have had just the opposite, there's a home for them here Before we conclude, I just want to say that listening to you today, if I didn't know Xavier and would listen to this podcast, you would have convinced me I must come here. Is there anything else that you would like to say to somebody who's thinking about Xavier or, yeah?
First of all, thank you, Ed. I appreciate that. It's something that, Xavier imbues in you that you almost can't help but bring it outside. I very freely talk about my belonging to the parish, my activities with the parish. I would say to someone who is discerning where they go next, give Xavier a chance. We have a lot to offer, from young adults all the way up to the adult activities group and everybody in between. There's something for someone to do, whether it's playing music, singing, serving, and not to forget them, because they're the first people that people see are the hospitality ministers. And so different from what I'm sure you and I remember as ushers growing up,
Sure.
I was frightened of them. I was terribly frightened of them. But everybody in their own way makes Xavier home. If someone is looking, come see what my home is like, and I'll show you.
On that note, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Ed.
Here I am, Lord. I come to do your
The music you are hearing is provided by the Xavier Music Ministry. From Age to Age is produced by St. Francis Xavier Church in New York City. This episode was recorded and edited by Cynthia Bastidas for Semillita Productions. A special thanks to the staff of St. Francis Xavier, Xavier High School, and Father Kenneth Bowler. Join us on our next episode. To learn more about St. Francis Xavier, visit sfxavier.org and look for us on social media. All copyrighted music reproduced with the permission of one licensed copyright, A-7000530, rights reserved. Music reprint license number 944. From downtown Manhattan, we wish you a blessed morning, day, or night.